Welcome back to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Certification course. Everyone can be seated. And if you can be turning over in your books, of course, we're in the acceptance unit. We're finishing up the acceptance unit. We're getting to the end anyway. And, of course, this is a really great book tying everything together thus far that we learned in the character unit. And that's the first of 5 of the junior high series. And we've completed that one. And we're finishing up here in the acceptance unit, just probably 4 or 5 more classes, and we'll be done with this unit. But all of these pieces we're tying together will also take into the next unit. But you'll see, even in tonight's class, and I'm sure you've seen through the classes that have been coming forth with Catan and William and David, all of the things, how they've been tying it back together with the things that we've covered from the character unit. Because it's very important that these pieces are connected together, because it's so entwined with each other. It's one part works with the other part, and it's all very much needed. But if you'll be turning in your acceptance unit over to LP7D, we're still in Procedure 6, and that's where David left off on the last class. And we're going to go back starting in that procedure, because we're going to finish up some pages that he didn't quite get to, but we're kind of stuck in the middle of this procedure. So we're going to rehearse a little bit and then move forward. So here on LP7D, Procedure 6, it says, have students read the section entitled To Do or Not to Do. And that's what David had read and went over very thoroughly. And they're found on pages 140 to 143 in their handbooks. Stress that knowing why these behaviors are risky will help them to resist influences and encourage sexual behaviors, taking drugs and alcohol, and engaging in criminal activities. So it's very important, once again, as a teacher, when we see that stress, that means really get into detail, really make it stick in their minds. Paint that picture very well. Add some color, as, our speakers are very apt to do when they go into certain topics. They can put a lot of color with it. And it's not to get graphic. It's not to expose certain things, but it's to leave a lasting memory in the mind. And that's what it's there to do. And as a teacher, we should always remember when we see here, it says about those influences, how to resist those influences. Remember where we got that from on page 60 of the character unit. Very important to remember how we're tying these pieces to the puzzle together. And of course, we have that in the acceptance unit, but remember, we're building here. So don't forget where it first started in that foundational part. But of course, continuing on, it says, read the article, Bad Choices Lead to Teenagers' Death. Have students answer the questions that follow on page 144. Notice this word once again, stress that engaging in risky behavior is not a game. It can even result in death. So once again, we're wanting to stress these points, but turning over to page 141, David covered the to do or not to do, and looking over to page 141, we want to look here at number 4, and it says, don't be influenced to break the law. And the reason we're reading this one again, because the story we're going to cover ties a lot into what takes place when someone breaks the law. And of course, we always think that, we get the video games, we get the Grand Theft Auto or any other game that you can find, and you're rewarded for stealing. The more you steal, the more crime you commit, the higher your score is. And of course, that encourages things like that. And then when, things go wrong, the game ends and you push the restart button and you start all over again. Well, life's not like that. You don't get a restart button. You don't get to redo things. And when you think about don't be influenced to break the law, it's always great to take your students and look out into society today and look at current criminal cases that have been tried in the courts and look at what they'll find. And the one that I found very interesting, and I would encourage everyone to read about this, to research it, because it's something that it's a reality in society. And it involved a female police officer that shot a young man in Minnesota. And of course, one of the jurors, I was really interested in what the jurors were thinking when they found this lady who was a cop. She accidentally, according to her, she accidentally grabbed her handgun instead of her taser, and she shot the young man, and the young man died. And one of the jurors that was speaking, they said, I can't speak for all the jurors, but I can say that in the room, this would pretty much be the same statement that was made by all jurors, that we really believe she's a great person. And we actually believe that she's a great cop. But she accidentally grabbed her handgun instead of the taser, and she shot and killed the young man, and she was charged with accidentally committing a crime. So she's guilty that she accidentally committed a crime. And now she's going to prison. You know, and you think about something like that. Well, what about when somebody breaks the law to the point, as we've talked about the football player that was going 156 miles an hour, hits the SUV with a young lady from behind, it engulfs in flames, and they can actually hear the young lady screaming as she's burning to death. You know, could you imagine driving the vehicle, you get out of the car that hit her, and it's miraculous that 156 mile an hour, you're still okay. So you get out and you're thinking, wow, no harm done. But as you're sitting there on the side of the road, you have to listen to that young lady scream as she's burning. You know, that's what you got to live with for the rest of your life. So where you think you're okay, the misery of what you brought onto someone else can be very devastating, and is very devastating. And that's what we're looking at in society, this law. And why do we have rules? Well, of course, as we said from the beginning, these rules are to keep us safe. You know, if we didn't have a do not steal, nobody really worries about the do not steal until someone steals something from them. No one worries about the do not trespass until somebody trespasses into their yard or trespasses into their bedroom and takes something or rearranges something, and then we start to care. Once that law, the breaking of that law or that rule starts affecting us, then we start to care. And as society, we have to start to care before that rule or law that governs this morality that we're talking about. It could be in the classroom, could be a rule that is set up in a family setting, rules to your bedroom, rules to the bathroom, and so forth, rules to the dining room table. You know, I always tell some young men I know that everybody wants to use a clean bathroom, but nobody wants to clean it. Well, you don't get the benefits of a clean bathroom unless you help clean it. And, you know, a bathroom is kind of like your character. You have to maintain it. If you just let it go, it gets really bad and it gets really disgusting. And if that'll paint your mind what our character can get like if you don't maintain and clean the bathroom and you just let it go, that's really what our character becomes like. It becomes very infectious. It becomes something that's contaminating. It brings disease. It brings confusion. It brings a lot of things into the mind to where you can't make a sensible decision. Well, it can be worse than salmonella or something like that. It can be way worse. Well, here on page 141, once again, don't be influenced to break the law. Notice it says shoplifting, trespassing, vandalism, or getting involved, notice, in any illegal activity, that's an activity that's against the rules, can lead to detrimental results. This is a choice. Once again, it has to be stressed. This is a choice that could have serious legal consequences. And when you think about the officer we were talking about in Minnesota who accidentally grabbed her firearm instead of her taser, you know, I had someone ask me, well, do you think that was a choice? She had to choose to grab her firearm, yes. And when you look, the firearm's on one side, taser's on the other. Firearm is very different in weight, very different in shape. She had to make a choice to pull something and fire. She might have accidentally grabbed the wrong one, but she made a choice to elevate that use of deadly force to the point that she did. And it was a bad choice. And sadly, someone died. But, you know, you can what-if situations to no end. Because what if she hadn't have done it, the young man would have drove off with her hanging out the car. You know, what if? Well, if we could just get society into not breaking these rules, not breaking these laws, we don't have to what if anything. We can actually start having some peace in society. But notice here it says legal consequences mean police, court, community service, or detention centers. Please don't think it can't occur to you or that you won't get caught. There's a lot of people that think they were never going to get caught. But one thing about it, eventually everyone gets caught in something. You know, when you think that, nobody will know. I can tell you as a parent, a lot of times you already know what took place, but you give them time to come tell you. They're already caught. They just don't know they're caught. And you're allowing them the time to try to help them, and you try to give them some guidance as we do our classrooms. Even though someone made a bad choice, just telling them they made a bad choice is not enough. You have to guide them back into how to make the right choice. And, teaching someone how to do the right thing is more than just telling them they did the wrong thing. It's actually guiding and giving direction and showing. Well, juvenile detention centers, once again, are filled with young people who thought that it couldn't occur to them. An illegal choice not only affects you, but it will also affect the person who has been victimized. And you think about doing things, and when you bring bodily harm to someone, that's devastating, especially when you see that person on a daily basis. And then you start thinking about people that have mental situations, and that was very big in the news this week with a professional football player who kind of had a mental meltdown right in the middle of a football game. And, and all they could talk about was whether this man was going to either continue to play or were they going to cut him from the team. How dare him still do this and be paid what he's paid. And it's like it took almost 2 days for the focus of, there's something mentally wrong with this guy. He needs help. And they've known this for a long time. So there's more to life than making money. There's more to life than winning games, whether it be football, basketball, baseball, video games, whatever. We have to have true compassion, as we've talked about before, because when someone is breaking the rules, you have to start wondering, okay, what do they know and how much do they know and how much is their mind processing? Are they able to do what we've been going through here? When you have the peaceful solution in your mind, you're better able to process something. But if it was never put into your mind, you don't have a clue how to do it. It would be like taking someone who has never, ever done any electrical work whatsoever, and you drop them off at a house, and you give them all the supplies, everything they could possibly want and need to do the job, and tell them to do it. You gave them all the tools, but they don't have the knowledge of how to do it. So when the house burns down or somebody gets shocked, there shouldn't be much of a question on what went wrong. Well, there's rules and laws to electricity. There are, but if you don't know them, how do you apply them? Because those rules are set to keep us safe. And life is the same way. If you don't know them, how do you apply them? Well, here it says, innocent people and their property suffer because of crime. And we're going to turn over here to page 143. But looking back at page 142 really quick, you see, and David went over these things. There at the end of class, he went over them fairly quickly, but he gave a lot of examples and statistics and things that were taking place with the HIV. And he gave an example of Rock Hudson, who was a very popular movie star back before my time. But when Rock Hudson died, I remember this, and this is something that stuck out in my mind. I was in the 7th grade, didn't even know who the man was, but we all knew he had a really bad disease. And our teachers were big Rock Hudson fans. And all we knew was we did not want that disease. That's all we knew in the 7th grade. And that actually made a lasting effect on my mind and a lot of people I went to school with, their mind on, well, what did they do to get it? Because we don't want it. Because in the 80s, this was a very scary thing. And today it's still just as deadly. But, through drugs and pharmaceuticals, they say, well, you can still live with the disease. Well, living with the disease sometimes isn't always the best thing. In fact, I don't know if someone gave me the option, you can live without the disease or you can live with the disease. I think I'd rather live without the disease. I think that would be the better choice in the long run and would help me accomplish my goals, because pretty much you have to look, we get very self-centered in society. When you say, well, I can live with the disease. Okay, you can live with it. Now, are you willing to make all of your family live with it? Are the other people you will encounter in your life that you're going to build relationships with, are you willing to make them live with it too? Because that's what you're saying. That if I have this and it's very infectious, that everybody I encounter is going to have to be like me and just live with it because I made a bad choice. So it's better to not do anything that would lead to that. But one thing I want to encourage teachers, and it's something to tell you, but it's better for you to get with your students. And I know a lot of school computers are censored, so it will guard back a lot of the negativity. I'm not telling any young person to get on the internet and look this up, but look it up with a parent or a guardian, a teacher. But it's one thing to tell you STDs affect the heart, the mind, the body, the liver, the kidneys. It affects the whole body. It's one thing to tell you that, but it's another thing for you to go onto the internet and research it and see for yourself how much it actually affects the body. I can show you an article, but you can go on there and you'll find out the research is endless on what it does to the body and how it can even directly affect the heart. You know, and I would encourage research when heart procedures are done and when someone has some kind of procedure to their heart. Research how that's done, and that will kind of connect the dots for you on how much STDs can affect that muscle that pumps the blood. Because when someone can do a heart surgery and enter in through the body in a certain way and go directly to your heart, that should tell you there's more than just that instrument that goes directly to your heart through that part of your body. You know, and it'll open up a lot of, I better not do this because this is going to be the result. It's not a what if. It's if I take my hand and I stick it in a can of black paint or purple or green or yellow, when I pull my hand back out, it's going to be black, green, purple, or yellow, depending on what I stuck my hand down in. There's nothing you can do to get around it. You made a choice, you have a consequence. Same thing with these diseases that we're talking about here, but you'll find that they affect the mind. They truly affect the mind, even if it's just to the point a person has to live with knowing they made a bad choice and now they're living with something the rest of their life. It doesn't mean it can't be fixed. It doesn't mean a person can't get through life and make better choices. It doesn't mean that whatsoever, but it's better to never have been caught up in those instances. It's better to never be in those circumstances. As a young high school, I say young because they were like juniors in Georgia, and this was a few years back where the greatest outbreak they had in the school, you know, it was herpes. And you think about, they shut the high school down, and you can go online and pull that up about the high school in Georgia. They shut the high school down because of the herpes outbreak. Well, why the herpes outbreak? Well, we gave them a class. You know, yeah, you gave them a class, but did you give them the tools they needed? You know, it's one thing to show things on a film. It's another thing to truly educate, and to educate in the right way. And experience, as David was speaking about, is not the best way to learn. And that's what we're going to read about tonight. Here on page 143 is someone who made a bad choice. They were influenced to make a bad choice. And, of course, they did it. And when you think about these things, before we get into the story, let's read the very top part, and then we'll read some articles, then get into the story. It says, the following article tells one of thousands of true stories of someone who made a bad choice, risked taking drugs, and suffered the ultimate consequence. Well, of course, the ultimate consequence is death. And here I want to read you a couple of headlines and some articles. And it's very interesting. This is from CBS, and this was actually today. It says more than 100,000 Americans died of drug overdoses in 1 year. And it says an estimated 100,000 Americans died of drug overdose in 1 year, a never-before-seen milestone that health officials say is tied to the COVID-19 pandemic and more dangerous drug supply. Well, keep that 100,000 in mind, because we'll find out that 100,000 is really a lot bigger than that, but we're going to call it 100,000 for now because that's what the articles are saying. And here's another one. This one comes from Health News. And it says, in 1 year pandemic, more died of overdoses than gun violence or car accidents. So think about that. More people, you see there, in 1 year died of drug overdoses more than gun violence or car accidents. But how much do you see about gun violence? And how much do you see people saying, we need to take guns away, we need to do this, we need to do that? You know, drugs don't inject themselves just like guns don't shoot people by themselves. It takes someone to do it. And there's a lack of education involved in both of those. Also with, risk-taking behavior behind a steering wheel. Here's another. Overdose deaths reach record highs as the pandemic spreads. And it says Americans died of drug overdoses in record numbers as pandemic spread across the country. Federal researchers reported on Wednesday the result of lost access to treatment, rising mental health problems, and wider availability of dangerously potent street drugs. Now, street drugs, that's what they're talking about here. You know, they're talking about the fentanyl, and you've heard Catan and William talk a lot about the fentanyl and how just touching it. Catan gave an example how a cop just barely touched it and it almost killed him. It's that strong. It's that powerful, and it's not meant to go into the body. Gasoline runs great in the car, but if you drink it, it's not going to run great for you. And these synthetic drugs that people are putting in their body are the same thing. And here's another one. U.S. annual drug overdose deaths hit record levels. And that's from the BBC News. So here we know about it. Okay, we know it's taking place. It's not a secret. People are dying. And, you know, you think about, before we get into the story here, because they're going to talk about some pills that are shaped like shamrocks. And I want to show you some things here, and here's a couple pills, and man, they come in every shape and form. You know, they look, to me, they kind of look like the old, you know, Sweet Tarts or Pez candies. They just look, oh man, those things look fun. You know, and you got the smiley faces. You know, you couldn't help but have a great time eating something like that. And then you can get, you know, Homer Simpson or the Smurfs, you know, or you can get Bart Simpson. You know, you get all those things. And this is just a couple. You know, there's endless molds, and that's what they're doing. They're molding these things, you know, and they're pretty up to date too. I printed this one in black and white because I think the skull's probably the best one on there that represents what's going on. But you can get Bitcoin, you know, Wi-Fi, Superman. There's all kinds of stuff you can enjoy with these things, you know. And you can fly high once you get to these things, because everything I'm showing you is ecstasy. It's what they call the daybreak. You call it a Molly, daybreak drug, or ecstasy. Then here's just another one. You know, you got an alien, you got a heart. You know, it's going to bring true love, I'm sure. But they look very enticing. And when we read about this story, think about these, you know, these pills we've seen, and they look like candy. Yeah, how in the world could candy? How's that going to hurt someone? I ate Sweet Tarts. I ate a lot of Sweet Tarts. Man, I've ate bags of Sweet Tarts. I never had a problem. And that's kind of what they look like. They don't look like they're going to harm anybody. They don't look like it would hurt anyone. I mean, people are taking them every day. Before we get into this story, though, I want to show you another statistic. And this is from mybiosource.com, and they kind of monitor the level of deaths that take place due to certain instances. And this one's called Firearms versus Doctor Drug Deaths. And firearm deaths in the United States last year was 31,940. Now, death by the, we'll say, pharmaceutical system. We'll use that just to be politically correct. Remember, death by firearm, 31,940. We read there was 100,000 drug overdoses that took place with illegal drugs. But deaths that are actually allocated to the pharmaceutical industry were 783,936. And you can see that number right there. And they break it down to where you had adverse drug reactions was 106,000. Outpatient surgery, which involved drugs, was 199,000. Medical errors, 98,000. That's 3 times the people that shot themselves or someone else. And then you have other medical related situations, 380,936. Now, I'm not speaking against the medical field in any which way, shape, or form. Not putting it down in any which way, shape, or form. Not saying that it's wrong. Not telling you to go do it or not do it. There's some medications that people, it's necessary for them to take due to the situations in their lives. But it's better to try to prevent the situation from taking place in your life that requires the medication. Now, that's kind of hard to do once you're 60 and you're looking back thinking, man, if I'd have done all this different, I wouldn't be in this situation. But for a lot of young people who think they're going to live forever, well, no, you really can live longer if you guard and protect yourself. Because once again, here we're going to read about a young lady named Brittany Chambers, and she thought she was going to live for a long time, drive that beautiful little red sports car she had, and she had high hopes. And her friends, the best of friends, you might say, they were going to help her celebrate this birthday and send her off the right way. Well, here, let's get started to bad choices lead to teenagers' death. And it says the party began at 7 p.m. last Saturday in a suburban home. About 30 teenagers were celebrating Brittany Chambers' 16th birthday with a 12-pack of Corona, a bottle of Captain Morgan's rum, and some Mickey's Fine Malt Liquor. Now, it's important to point out to your students at that time, you just said the young girl was 16 years old, and here you've just read 3 things that you're supposed to be the age of 21 to purchase. If you don't do that, you'll read right over this and you'll think, the drugs was the worst part. Well, once again, they shouldn't have had the alcohol there to begin with. That can lead to making bad choices in itself. Teenagers tend to think that whatever amount of alcohol they have, all must be drank that night. Nothing can be left. And they'll try to do it not realizing how extremely dangerous it is to the body. But continuing on here, it says at least 4 of the teens, including Brittany, partied with 4 shamrock-shaped pills. And that's that beautiful little color. You can imagine the green and probably bright and just all joyful looking, just wanting to jump in your mouth by itself, I'm sure. It says 6 days later, 5 of Brittany's former Monarch High School classmates may face felony charges, and the party guest of honor is dead. The pills, thought to be the designer drug ecstasy, were a gift for Brittany, who looked forward to getting her driver's license and sitting behind the wheel of a new red convertible. At $25 each, the drugs were easy to come by. A day before the party, 3 of Brittany's friends decided to buy a special gift for her. And notice where they got them. During first period at Monarch High, a girl passed a note to Rebecca Becky Sheffield, asking if she had any ecstasy. I said yes, and she then said that she knew a girl who would like to buy 4. Sheffield, 18, so being a senior in high school, she said in a written statement for the sheriff's deputies. Sheffield's classmates told her to look for a tall blonde in the B wing after first class. Sheffield, that girl, and a shorter blonde ducked into the bathroom, where the 2 girls gave Sheffield $100 in 20s, 10s, 5s, and $1 bills. After the drug transaction in the school bathroom, one of the blonde girls kept the green shamrocks until the birthday party the following night at the Superior's home of Brittany's mother and her mother's husband. Now, about 2 hours into the party, Brittany and the 2 blondes and another friend swallowed the tablets. Brittany ingested half a pill. Preston Chambers told reporters earlier this week that his sister wasn't feeling the euphoria that the so-called love drug is supposed to induce. About 11 p.m., she took the other half. So here she's taking half of this pill, thinking that I'm supposed to be enjoying myself. Well, it's not working. Well, let me take more. If you take something and it makes you feel sick, odds are you probably shouldn't take the other half too. But here it says, shortly after that, Brittany was vomiting in the upstairs bathroom. Her mother, Marcy Chambers, called 911 sometime after 1 a.m. During the next 6 days, Marcy Chambers would sit by her daughter's hospital bedside, praying for a response from the girl. Friends, family members, and well-wishers gathered in the intensive care unit's waiting room. Brittany has everything to live for, Preston Chambers said. She's highly motivated, he said, an honor student who talked openly with her mother about drugs. So once again, young girl was doing well in school and she talked with her mother about drugs, but it's important that parents talk to their children not about just say no. That was the campaign in the 80s when I was in school, the Just Say No program. It didn't work. It didn't work at all. In fact, I think drug use skyrocketed. You know, you tell the teenager you can't do it, and, well, that's what I want to do right there. What you just said I can't do, that's what I want to do. And, you know, there was more to it than that. And the intentions of Nancy Reagan, who was the president's wife, she had great intentions of what she was doing, but it didn't work very well. Just telling someone to say no, we have learned, is not enough. You have to educate them on why do you say no. And, of course, they tried that later on, but it was already so out of hand by the time all this took place. And here you see this young girl. She talked with her mother about drugs too, but you don't really know the conversation, but you really wonder if the consequential of making, this is a death sentence. You do it, you can die. And there is no replay button to push after that. Well, notice here it says on Friday afternoon, Brittany's family made the anguished decision to take her off life support. At 1:18 p.m., Brittany's young life slipped away. 16 years old, slipped away. The hospital waiting room, which was filled with hope the day before, was a scene of tears and mourning. About 30 of the teenager's friends and relatives braced themselves against the hospital walls. Some slumped in chairs outside the ICU, others embraced one another. The news of Brittany's death quickly spread through the Monarch High School campus. Drug awareness ribbons were passed out to students. Earlier in the week, Preston Chambers said everybody occasionally makes bad choices, not fully understanding the possible outcomes. Detectives said the choices made during the last week led to the arrest of 3 of Brittany's friends, the girl who passed a note, Sheffield, and her fiancé, Sugar. The choices also ended in Brittany's life and her dream of driving her red convertible. So you think about all these high hopes. She had goals. She had realistic goals. She had something she could achieve. The only problem was the goal that was realistic became unrealistic when she implemented the drugs into the situation. Going to school, making great grades, talking to your mom about the right and wrong decisions to make in life, all of those were healthy for her achieving her goals. When someone brings in a drug, well, that's bringing in an obstacle. That's bringing in something that prevented her from achieving her goals. And if you notice here, let's turn over to page 144 because we're going to talk some more about it. And, of course, question number 1 on page 144, and you're going to have your students answer the following questions, but challenge their minds from what they've already been through. You notice it says, what was the bad choice Brittany made? And using drugs. That's very simplistic, but there's so much more your students should be able to give you. There's so much more you can challenge them with these things. And with this in mind, turn over to page 62, because these are things we've covered just in this book alone. And challenge them to find these things. Because remember, it was her friends who bought this gift for her, and they brought it to her birthday party, and they gave it to her. These friends. Notice the very top page here, page 62, the very top. It says, real friends encourage you to do what is right. And notice it says, a friend is one who supports, respects, encourages, and accepts you as a unique individual. Friends can come in all shapes and sizes and from all walks of life. Friends can come from all nationalities and ethnicities. It's important not to cut yourself off from getting to know someone because they are different. Keep in mind that no two people are exactly alike. We are all human beings who share more similarities than differences. Now, that right there should have give you an idea that she should be open to make friends with everyone, right? Well, where's that dividing line? If you remember chapter 8 of the character unit, you had the dividing line on page 8 that says the difference between right or wrong. Well, notice here on the choosing friends, it says the importance of choosing friends, positive friends, cannot be overstated. We also read in the character unit said the power of an influence cannot be overstated. And that was on page 60. It says people with immoral principles and negative character as friends can influence you to make choices that you could regret for the rest of your life. And for that young lady, the rest of her life was about 4 or 5 hours after she took the pill, and then off to the life support you go. Learning to recognize the qualities that make a positive friend takes time and effort. Avoiding meeting someone and immediately deciding to accept this person as a friend. Take your time to learn about him or her first. Remember, just because someone has a great personality does not mean they have a positive moral character. When choosing friends, keep these things in mind and proceed with, notice, wisdom and caution. Wisdom and caution. And then turn over to page 132, because we've covered this earlier in this chapter. On page 132, and remember, we're talking about what was the bad choice Brittany made. Well, she had some friends that were probably positive at one time, and that could have been one of the very few things they allowed themselves to be influenced to do, because they heard about it obviously from somewhere, and this is supposed to be a gift to make someone's night better. Well, influences are everywhere. Notice an influence is anything that affects the way we think, our interactions with others, and the choices we make. Or as page 60 says in the character unit, it can affect the way we think, feel, and act. It affects our decision making. And whenever you have something that influences you, if you're with your friends, and these are supposed to be great friends, and you're at home, and you're in the people that you want to be around, the company you enjoy the most, what will taking a drug or drinking an enormous amount of alcohol, how will that improve that? And think about that and challenge your students' minds. If you're with the people you want to be with, how can using something that is illegal, dangerous, brings death, easy to prove that people are dying from it, how can that help them? Well, knowing the difference over on page 133, it says, have you ever heard of the age of accountability? That simply means that although you're not an adult yet, you have arrived at an age where you are responsible for what you think, say, and do, and for the decisions you make. And here you have that young girl at age 16, had high hopes. She has to live with the choice she made. She might have been influenced from people that were positive friends at one time, but this one instance, notice this one instance, was thrown into this situation, and she acted on it, and it cost her her very life. So challenge your students, and also turn back over to page 113, because you want to bring up self-control that we've covered in this unit. We'll get into that more. I think it's 113. Yeah, 113. Notice it says on 113, use self-control and morality when setting goals. And she had goals. Remember, one of her goals was to get into that nice, shiny red convertible, and she wanted to drive. She had just turned 16. And of course, this using self-control and morality when setting goals helps you to actually be able to live and enjoy the goals you've set. Once you get to it, accomplishing a goal is one thing, and then you're supposed to be able to enjoy it. You're supposed to be able to have some satisfaction in what you've done. It's a little bit more than climbing Mount Everest, and you get to the top, and you think, wow, I got to the top. I better get back down before I die. You accomplished a goal, but we're talking about things here that are life building, character building, building society, making communities better, making life better. And that's a great challenge, especially in today's society. It's a huge challenge in today's society. And I'll just throw this up really quickly. I seen this on the news before I came here. And I was watching a lady, and she was on Fox News. That was the channel that was playing that I was listening to on the television set. And she said, I've got a problem in my mind. She said, I'm a vaccinated individual, and all my friends are vaccinated. And we're all still getting COVID. I've got it again. I've had it for a second time. And she said, I was told that if I took this, that I would be able to go back and enjoy life. Well, and I'm not here to condemn vaccines or promote vaccines, but whenever something goes wrong in life, just like with this young lady, just like we were seeing with the pandemic, there comes a time when we have to sit back and say, what are we doing that's wrong? And not using the Band-Aid effect, start using what can we do to fix this? Challenge your students' minds. What would you do? What would you do if you were given charge to help remove drugs from the street or remove disease, pandemics. Some call it plague, some people call it disease, whatever you want to use for it. How could you help get that out of society? Challenge their minds for it because self-control is the key to it. And notice here it says to determine if your goals are positive, moral, and honest, or negative, immoral, and dishonest, think carefully about the outcome or the end result. And you can see that this young lady didn't really consider the end outcome or the end result of what took place. And society has shown with 783,936, you can't inject your way out of sickness and disease. You can't, there's a lot of money made in pharmaceuticals, but, it's better to not get the sickness, and figure out how not to get the sickness. And people say, well, you can't do that. Well, Brittany would still be, this young lady in this story we read, would still be alive today if someone hadn't offered her these drugs. Well, why do people get into making drugs? It's easy money. It's quick, easy money. Well, that's just the drugs on the street. No, that's drugs in general. It's quick, easy money. Have your students look up the fentanyl business in, Sinaloa, Mexico, and then also coming across the border, and then have them look at the quarterly profits for Pfizer, Moderna. There's a lot of money in pharmaceuticals in general. Just keep that in your mind when going through with your students. Challenge them, though. You never know who will be able to come up with a great answer. It's like the person that said, people keep getting electrocuted. What can we do? We've put, the nicest outlets on the wall. We've put signs, hey, there's electricity here. It's live. How do you stop doing it? And one person comes up one day and says, well, we probably should tell people to quit putting the screwdriver in the outlet. That would go a long way in stopping people from getting electrocuted. And then people, come back and, well, who in the world would do that? Well, you got 783,000. It could lead to a lot. A lot of things take place every day that didn't have to cost someone their life. And it can be a very hard thing to deal with. But a lot of it is due to the lack of self-control. But here, once again, it says, if you were to achieve your goal, how it could affect you and those around you. Keep in mind that the ability to stop, think, and weigh the consequences of your actions, notice once again, that's called self-control. And if that young lady had thought about that, she's at the party, they gave her the green shamrock pill, probably all really bright in color and very desirable. I doubt it looked like, skull and crossbones, black and gray. I'm sure it had some kind of, it looked really nice. So she took it. And that pill cost her life. So you got to learn that she could have made choices. The students have to learn. We have to learn too, but the students need to learn that choices affect lives. They can actually cost someone their life. And here back on page 144, it says, at what point could Brittany have stopped and reconsidered to change the outcome of her decision? And you notice here it says at the point when plans were being made to organize a party of that nature. Well, the party was planned, but she might not have known about the shamrock pills. Somebody held on to them until the party, and they were a gift, and usually those things are handed out at the party. But challenge your students. Tell them, give me a quote of something you learned. What's something she could have done? And you should, from somebody, you should get the phrase, she could have set her mind in advance. And that goes into detail on page 80 in the character unit, what it means to set your mind in advance. Once again, the young lady had discussed drugs with her mother, so these were conversations she was having. But obviously it wasn't the results of this could take place with me. This could be the way that I die. When you're young, you never think you're going to die. It's kind of like a story I read the other day. It was yesterday. I was traveling and I heard it on Sirius Radio, and they were talking about how the state trooper was hit and died by another state trooper who was rushing to get to the scene to assist him. And it just occurred to be his brother. who was the other state trooper. And you think about that and you think about, man, how bad can it get? To know that here's a fellow state trooper and you're trying to rush to help them to, whatever situation's going on. So you're in a rush, you're trying to help because there's danger. And then you lose control of the car and you hit the other state trooper just to find out the state trooper is your brother because they went and they decided to be state troopers together. Think about the effects of that. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't that someone intended to do that. But, when we get going and we don't consider everything that's going on, and that's easy to do. When you're driving down a road, especially Texas roads, when you can drive for 80 miles and see nothing on both sides of the road, when you're driving down a road that it goes straight for like 10 miles and all of a sudden it starts sharp curves, you start seeing signs on the side of the road. And the speed limit might be 75, but you'll see where it says 60 mile an hour. And it starts showing little arrows because of the curve. And you can say, well, the speed limit's 75. I'm going to do what I want to do. And then when you get halfway into the curve and the car starts sliding and you're going off the hill, well, it's too late to go, well, I guess somebody knew what they were talking about when they said 60 mile an hour right here. There's rhymes and reasons for everything. And that's what we have to learn. Even though these things that we see could be so insignificant, we think that, that sign back there said this. I can do what I want to do. Well, you did what you wanted to do. How did it work out? When you think about these things and get these into the mind of students, once again, we live in a day and age to where there is unlimited examples all in a bar called Google. You can just type it in and you can find unlimited. There's no need to create more bad examples. We have enormous amounts of them. We don't need one more. And one more is not going to help teach somebody else how to do it better. It's better to live off what we've seen thus far. And here you have number 3. What are the consequences of her choices? Well, she dies, but that doesn't stop for her friends. Now her friends are being arrested and they're going to be tried. And you think, well, they didn't know what they were doing. It was accidental. Well, think back to the lady who was the cop in Minnesota. The jury even says that, oh, yeah, we know she accidentally did it. We're convinced of that. Not on purpose, but that wasn't the charge. She was charged with accidentally committing a homicide. We found her guilty because that's the charge. Well, here you have some young people here who are probably thinking about their little red Corvettes or red cars, and they want to go drive too, and they want to enjoy, get out of high school. You had one girl that was 18, probably getting ready to graduate, and now she's facing going to jail because she's going to be tried as an adult. And number 4 here, it says, is it too late for Brittany to change the outcome of her bad choice? Why or why not? And and of course the answer is yes, because she died. But challenge them. What time frame could she have made a better choice? And we've kind of discussed that so far. But, challenge them and ask them, where could she have made it right? Where could she have stopped this? If she could have, and I think society, for the most part, if we could see the end result of the choices we make when we're making them, we would do things very differently. Like if you're going to take that drug and you're able to hold the drug in your hand, and if it's if it's some of these drugs like fentanyl, just holding your hand can actually do you in. But let's just say you see it and you can actually see the end result of what occurs when you take that drug before you do it. Now I would think that most people would, if they see the end result is going to be a very negative thing, they would make a different choice. Well, the truth is you can see the end result of what you're going to do before you do it. And that's what the peaceful solution brings. That's what, you stop, think, and consider the outcome as we just read before you commit an action. You actually consider, and, you could say, well, yeah, I had 3 friends take these. They didn't die. Well, the 4th one did, and that one was you. You're the winner. It's like playing Russian roulette. Somebody always wins, and the winner doesn't get the best results. And really, think about the 3 friends that are left. Which is easier, to be the young lady that died or to be the friends that gave her the drug? And you have to live with the rest of your life knowing that you ended her life. Well, what could the peaceful solution have done to deal with that? Look over to page 123 once again. once again, we're challenging our students. We're trying to get them to pull back from what we've covered so far. And there's endless spots they could cover and grab and use and put forth in examples. But notice here, to be prepared to deal with setbacks. And of course, she had a goal, and she was going through trying to achieve a goal. And it says, when planning goals, it's important to consider the things that could keep you from achieving your objectives. Circumstances that interfere with reaching your goals are called setbacks. Well, that young girl had a setback, but hers ended her life. So her goals were done. But the three that were left, they still have to deal with the setback. Now they're going to be charged with a crime, and they're going to have to answer for what they did. So when you see the setbacks and the things that took place, there's more than just Brittany's life that was affected. You had quite a few lives that were affected because of some really bad choices, all for just a short time of, as I think it said, euphoria. They wanted to feel this euphoria, something that they hadn't felt before. Well, sometimes that's, death is something you only get to feel once. You don't get a second shot at it. Once you start getting the feel of it, it's pretty much there. Back to page 144 at the very bottom. Notice it says, Brittany lost sight of her goals, and she made a choice that took her life. And think about what we read so far. She made a decision that was outside of her objectives of accomplishing her goal. And that was a setback. Just this setback cost her life. So notice here it says, don't lose sight of your goals. Your entire future is ahead of you. Yes, others are doing drugs, thousands of others, and they are all suffering. No one who does drugs is safe. And I know that, I've heard students bring up, especially recently, I was just in a country speaking to someone here not long ago, and they were asking about the drug safe houses in San Francisco and in New York City, to where if you're a druggie, you can go to the safe house, they'll give you a clean needle, you have your drugs, they'll make sure you can inject yourself, they'll monitor you if you start overdosing, they have something to give you to try to reverse the effects, or they'll call 911 for you, but it's a house to where you can come and get high safely. Now, that's like saying there's a place where you can come shoot yourself safely. You can come take poison safely. Those two things don't even connect with each other. It's like saying that it's nighttime, so the sun came out. It just don't work that way. And if your goal is to keep someone safe by letting them inject poison into their body, that kind of sounds counterproductive. Well, when you ask people at safe houses, they say that we're trying to do this until they can get it out of their system. Last time I checked, you don't get it out of your system by adding more to it. That is very confusing. And I think people have the real desire to help people, but helping people do the wrong thing over and over and over, let's say that Brittany here would have made it through this. Going back and trying it again would have been the wrong thing to do. That doesn't help her. Here, you got sick the first time, try it again. It won't get you sick this time. This time you'll do better. You'll reach the euphoria. So think about it and challenge your students. Really challenge your students with what we see in society. Take the things out from the headlines. Take the things from your local communities and ask them, how could we make this better? What's wrong with it? Okay, if you say there's something wrong with it, how can you fix it? If you want to talk about a problem, you need to find a solution. And that's what the peaceful solution truly does. And it requires us to put forth a lot of effort in moving forward with this and making a right choice. And looking back over to LP7D, we're going to get into the next procedure, and it's entitled Making a Right Choice. And here it says, emphasize that exercising self-control and considering the consequences of their actions will enable them to make wise choices. And those wise choices is, not just having the knowledge, but having the ability to apply the knowledge. Shows forth some wisdom. Have students read the section entitled Make a Right Choice on page 145 in their handbooks. Once again, emphasize that a right choice is worth the effort, regardless of how they are viewed by their peers. They can have the satisfaction of making a choice that will keep themselves, notice, and others safe. It's not just us we're thinking about everyone in making these right choices. And of course, then we'll have students complete the goals worksheet on page 146 in their handbooks. and remind them that achieving their goals requires staying focused and making the right choice. And no one ever said accomplishing your goals, especially when you challenge yourself, is easy, because it's not. It can be very difficult in accomplishing what you set out to do. Even though it might be a realistic goal, it could be very realistic and right at the end of your fingers. But you'll notice it slips through like the wind sometimes through your hand as you try to grasp it. You just got to keep working at it. And practice makes perfect. It makes you a very important person, or value imitate practice, as we learned in the character unit. So turning over to page 145 here with making a right choice. And remember, we're building off chapter 6, which was reach for your goals. And that's what we have read about and talked about. And looking back over really quickly, I'll read this for you. I want to check, make sure I tell you the right page. On page 118, it says, the next step in setting positive, realistic goals is determine if they are long or short term. Of course, a short-term goal is one that can be achieved within a short period. For example, you make a goal to clean your room after going to school. You decide to save your allowance this week and attend a special field trip. Short-term goals are a great way to test your goal-setting skills. An easy way to make goal setting a part of your daily routine is to make a to-do list. You want to write down what your goals are. And that's one thing that we cover, that people who set goals write them down. And looking at that, I've heard of people say, write it on your bathroom mirror. Write it somewhere where you have to see it every day. A lot of people that want to diet, they write it on the refrigerator. And then you have to make the decision whether you want the, the quart of ice cream, or, because once you start, you can't stop. You got to eat the whole thing. That's just the way it goes. You don't want to waste anything. And, once you put it back in the freezer, it don't taste great the second time around. You'll find all kinds of reasons on why it has to be done. I know, I do it a lot. But these goals that you put there, they're there to help and remind us of why we need to make a right choice. But notice here it says, whenever you're faced with a choice, consider the consequences of your actions, consider the goals that you have set for yourself, and then make a decision that will not, notice, bring harm to yourself, bring harm to others, jeopardize your positive goals, or risk your life. And you don't want to do something, risking your life. If you lose your life trying to accomplish your goal, then let's say you accomplish your goal. There's many people that have climbed Mount Everest and didn't make it back down. They accomplished their goal, and their bodies are still on Mount Everest. Because a lot of times when people die there, because of the climate and the temperature, the bodies are there. And you can go online and you can read about lots of people. In fact, I think they made movies about this, where people, they got to the top and couldn't get back down because of the lack of oxygen. But they accomplished their goal, right? Not saying that people that set really high, challenging goals is a wrong thing, but if you die accomplishing your goal, live a little after you accomplish your goal. Have some satisfaction with it. The young lady got a sports car, didn't even get to enjoy it. If you buy a house and never move in, you didn't accomplish much. It's, if you want a family and you get a family, and you lose your family very quickly, you probably should consider what it took. And losing a family can come in many different ways. It's harder to rebuild what you've already had. It's harder to put back together what you already have in front of you when you just have to maintain it. And think about your character that way. Whenever your character's in front of you and you've built it, you've solidified it, it's becoming more solid by the day, and then somebody comes and starts chipping away at it, and they'll always work at the bottom first, right? Because it's top heavy. It's kind of like the tower there in France where it's just leaning, and everybody, wouldn't you hate to be the guy that laid out those floor plans and didn't get it set right? Because everybody knows he had the leaning tower going there. But, you look at that, and you think about how you can do all these things right. You know, you'll see people that they're successful business people, they have careers in certain fields, and then one day they're sitting in a courtroom because they made one really bad choice. And it's a lot of times it's just due to not controlling their emotions, and they let it get the best of them. Well, we have to be able, and we're going to continue in this. We're going to stop at that point so we can build off of this right choice, how it doesn't bring harm to ourselves or anyone else or the environment. And remember, we read that once again on page 8 in the character unit. And you want to be pulling these things back together. But once again, when you're dealing with young people, teenagers, I remember when I was a teenager, I just thought my car would go as fast as I wanted it to. I never thought about the repercussions of what would take place if I wrecked. You know, and I didn't wreck and I lived, but I have quite a few people I went to school with that did wreck and they didn't live. You know, and it's easy to say, well, I made it, you know, it's okay. You know, there's a lot of people die every year because of these risk-taking behaviors, whether it be drugs, abusing alcohol, you know, and drugs, as William brought out before, it's more than just illegal drugs. People are using prescription drugs, going in and stealing them out of their parents' cabinets, grandparents' cabinets, and taking them to school and selling them. You know, one student asked me one time, they said, well, if a drug works for that person, and it's great, keeps them healthy, it should work for me, right? And I said, well, read that sentence right there. And he read it, and I said, now here, take my glasses and put them on and read that sentence. He put my glasses on, he goes, man, are you blind? No, I'm not blind, but I can't read without them. And, you know, those glasses work for me, but how did it work for you? They didn't. Well, it's the same with drugs. They're prescribed to an individual. That individual, you know, has been examined, and there's reasons for them to be assigned certain prescriptions. It's not for everyone. So once again, we're going to stop here on page 145. You know, once again, this is a very serious class in building with your students, connecting with them, but we're going to take a positive look on making these goals work and, of course, having a positive outlook and making the right choice as we move forward into the next class, which the next class will be, today is the 5th, so it's the 9th. It will be the 9th at 5:30, so 1-9, 5:30 p.m. So we look forward to seeing you back at that time. Thank you once again.